So hey guys, it's Zion again, and we're back on the battlefield. This is some Rush on Strike at Karkan that I got using the Tryhard M16. The night I was playing this, I was getting a little frustrated with how the other team was playing, and I thought to myself, well, if they're going to be annoying, then I'm going to destroy them. And while I didn't do as well as I'd have liked to, we did win this match, and I took a lot of deaths, but we won, and that's all that really matters in my book. Now, what I want to talk about today is a couple things, and this is a commentary I've been wanting to do for a few weeks now, but I've never had a reason to. And right now, there's something going on called Crystals for Life, a charity stream where they're speedrunning all the Final Fantasy games from start to finish, including all the extra ones like Crisis Core and Final Fantasy IV Interlude and all that. You can donate as much or as little as you like, and they'll announce your name on the stream as well as how much you've donated. As I'm recording this, they're playing Final Fantasy VII, and they'll be playing it probably by the time this goes up. So I encourage you to go over there, and if you don't have anything to donate, at least watch, because they are supported by Twitch with ads, and so even though you may not be able to give them anything directly by watching whatever ads they might play, which will only be when you log in, then you're supporting this charity, which is trying to stop type 1 diabetes in Canada and elsewhere. And because they're playing Final Fantasy VII, I think it's the perfect time to talk about this topic, which is the Final Fantasy VII as a turning point for me in the series. Because to that point, even Final Fantasy VI, there still had been this sort of medieval lack of technology. That yes, there were airships, yes, there was a lot more technology in 6 than there had been in previous games, but it was never on the industrial scale that Final Fantasy VII introduced. With Final Fantasy VI, you had the moving castle of the Sabinis, you had the airships, and you had a couple other things, but it was never anything particularly advanced. You didn't have Mako reactors, you didn't have giant military mass weapons. The most destructive thing in that game, prior to the ending, was Kefka poisoning a river. But of course in Final Fantasy VII, if you've played any of that game, you know that one of the most destructive things in the world is introduced with the very first mission, the Mako reactors, which is sucking the very energy of the planet out. And from Final Fantasy VII onward, there was always this sense that there was a lot of advanced technology around. Even in Final Fantasy X, where technology was banned by the religion of Yevon, there was still the Al-Bhed who embraced technology. And the airship itself had plasma cannons. Not even Final Fantasy VII had frickin' plasma cannons, they had rockets. So from a technological and setting standpoint, 7 was definitely a turning point in the series. But what I really was thinking about was the art style of the series, and this is probably due in large part to cultural changes in Japan, art changes in Japan, aesthetic likes and dislikes, both in Japan and abroad, as well as some new blood coming in, Tetsuya Nomura being one of the most famous and or infamous, depending on who you talk to. And from 7 on, it seems like everything got really anime style. Everything got really big eyes, big spiky hair, oversized weapons, long animations. And I want to say that a lot of it was due in part to the ability to actually do these things. In Final Fantasy VI, or 3 as it came out initially, on the SNES, you couldn't do a lot of the things that Final Fantasy VII was able to do with the PlayStation 1. Full CG cutscenes, full 3D animations and models, huge environments. These were not possible on the SNES simply due to hardware restriction. But with the power of the PlayStation 1 for its time, Final Fantasy VII was in large part a tech demo of what the PlayStation 1 was capable of. And it was also a way for the Square Enix team to, well, Squaresoft at the time, to stretch their creative muscles. What kind of world can we build with this new hardware? But the problem was, ever since then, all the animations, all the story, all the exposition, all the movies have gotten longer and drier and duller, and it's just really worse overall. And so for me, as much as I love Final Fantasy VII, and I still think, if only for the nostalgia factor, it is the greatest game I've ever played, it was the start of a downhill slide for Final Fantasy. Because if you look at the games prior to it, and you have Final Fantasies 1, 2, which I didn't play, 3, which was released only in Japan, and then 6 was 3, and blah blah blah, 4 and 5, and I know that the main characters there were a little moody, but you had the start in Final Fantasy VII of sort of the really depressed, angsty protagonist trying to come to terms with himself. And ever since then, the protagonists have gotten younger. Now, Cloud was 21 in Final Fantasy VII, and I'm not much older than he was then. And a lot of what he was wrestling with was something that I would wrestle with if I were in his shoes, and I have no problems wrestling with it. But if you look at the protagonists after that, they're 17, 16, 17, 19 if you count 10-2, 18 or 16, and gender neutral. And then with 13, they tried to bring it back. I think Lightning is 20 or 19 or some age closer to what I would prefer it be. But she was just as angsty and moody as Cloud was, but she took it to the extreme. And so Final Fantasy VII, for me, like I say, was this downhill slope. Not because of anything that Squaresoft did at the time, but because of some of the design features they put in. And if I can echo Yahtzee from Zero Punctuation, because he has a really lot of good things to say, for him, Final Fantasy VI was the last Final Fantasy with a believable villain and a story he could follow. Now, I would argue that you can still follow Final Fantasy VII's story fairly easily, so long as you keep a level head about it. But at the end of it all, the turning point that really made Final Fantasy VII, for me, the beginning of the downhill slide, was the emphasis on complexity. They wanted to keep trying to add new things, see what else they could experiment with. And they lost sight of where the strengths actually lay, which was in the story and the character development, rather than the expansive, long-winded exposition and stories they're trying to build. I could go on about this, but for now, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope you go check out the stream.